Hello everyone, welcome to the Period 7 Comprehensive View for APUSH. This period spans from 1898 to 1945. It's one of the most heavily impacted units for the AP exam, so it's going to be a long unit that you have to know the ins and outs of. So today we're just going to be going over that, and I hope you guys learn a lot from this video. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and follow my TikTok and Instagram at History's Edge. Let's get into it. So some of the big ideas in this unit includes the US transition from a regional power to a global superpower, which is obtained through imperial expansion, war victories, and economic influence. And then later we have the progressive era, and there's a lot of reformers who kind of wanted to address a lot of social and political problems, especially in the political sides of things, the industrial side of things with big businesses, and also the kind of woman side of things, women's rights and civil rights and all that. We also have the US experiencing a major economic shift, which included the Roaring 20s, then the Great Depression, and the New Deal reforms. And then we have US foreign policy evolved from isolationism to active global involvement through many various wars. And then there's an expanded role of the federal government in economic regulation and civil rights discussion. So we're going to start off with the progressive era reform. So this kind of dips back into the last unit where we had a lot of reformers trying to change big business, corruption in the workplace and in politics. And now it's going to kind of solidify into this movement. So the progressive movement is a middle-class reformers responding to industrialization, urbanization, and political corruption. Part of them include the muckrakers, who are investigative journalists who expose the corruption in many of these places. For example, we have Ida Tarbell, who exposed the Standard Oil monopolistic practices. We also have Upton Sinclair, who wrote the book The Jungle, which revealed meatpacking horrors, which led to the Meat Inspection Act, Pure Food and Drug Act. So we're seeing like these journalists are kind of influencing political laws and acts. We also have the social gospel, which was a religious movement that promoted social reform, and it was also linked to settlement houses like Jane Addams' Hull House. So Jane Addams' Hull House was like a house for immigrants that basically taught them how to fit into the society and kind of gave them a foundation rather than going to these corrupt big businesses who did not treat them fairly. And then political reforms expanded democracy, such as initiative, referendum, recall, and the 17th Amendment, which was the direct election of senators. We also have Theodore Roosevelt, who did the Square Deal. He's very famous for this, and basically what it is, it's a control of corporations, trust busting under the Sherman Antitrust Act, consumer protection, food and drug safety laws, and conservation in national parks and U.S. Forest Services. We have the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 that created central banking to manage inflation, interest rates, and currency supply. So imperialism and expansion from 1890 to 1917. So this new imperialism was driven by industrial overproduction in big businesses seen in period 6, which led to the need for overseas markets so they can expand and grow more. And there's also some military strategy in it, and it's basically advocated for a strong navy as it was essential for global dominance. Additionally, the belief in social Darwinism influenced imperialism, as it was the idea like they have to go on this civilization and they have to like influence them and teach them as better human beings of the society. Then you have the Spanish-American War in 1898. So some of the causes include yellow journalism, the USS Maine explosion, and it eventually led to the US victory, and they acquired Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines, which sparked the Philippine-American War from 1899 to 1902 against independence fighters. We also have the annexation of Hawaii, the open door policy in China, the Roosevelt Corollary, and the dollar diplomacy. World War I and domestic impact from 1914 to 1920. So the United States was initially neutral in the European-driven conflict, and they entered in 1917 due to unrestricted submarine warfare, specifically the sinking of Lusitania, the Zimmermann Telegram, and Germany basically sought Mexican alliance against the United States, and they interpreted it that in that way. And then economic connections to allies. So they were basically helping Great Britain early on, and they eventually just dragged them into the war. So mobilization, you have the Selective Service Act, which was a draft to build military, the War Industries Board, and the Committee of Public Information. Civil liberties restricted, so you have the Espionage Act, punished interference with war. Sedition Act, banned anti-war speech. After the war, you have Wilson's 14 points, which advocated for self-determination, free trade, disarmament, and the League of Nations. The Treaty of Versailles. Harsh penalties on Germany. The Senate refused to ratify due to the fear of entanglements. And then following the war, you had post-war tensions such as the Red Scare, strikes, and anti-immigrant sentiment. So the Roaring Twenties. So the Roaring Twenties was a very big economic boom in America, and it was mainly driven by new inventions, new ideas of working, new concepts, new consumer goods, and like just a cultural change in the way American society thought about consuming goods. So first you have the assembly line by Henry Ford, mass production, installment credit, and all of these stuff led to the rise in consumer goods like cars, radios, and appliances. So a lot of cultural changes occurred during this period, such as the flappers and loosening of Victorian social norms, the Harlem Renaissance in New York, which was African American arts, such as Langston Hughes and Duke of Ellington. And these guys basically just advocated for the displaying of African American culture and arts, and it became a very cultural hotspot right there in Harlem. And some of the social conflicts during this period was the Scopes trial, which was science versus religion, and it was over evolution teaching. You have the Red Scare, which was the fear of communism, anarchism after the Russian Revolution in World War I. So society was generally scared of immigrants, of entanglement into European affairs, and communism in general. Then you have immigration restrictions. The Emergency Quota Act and National Origins Act, they favored Northern and Western Europeans. But in general, they restricted a lot of immigrants based off the Red Scare and the fear of communism. Prohibition, the 18th Amendment, it was alcohol banned, and it led to speakeasies and organized crime. And advertising revolution, the radio and print media shaped consumer culture, and they used psychology to influence buying habits. And all while this is happening, you have suburban growth, and this was the widespread car ownership, allowing the middle-class Americans to move to the suburbs. The Great Depression, spanning from 1929 to 1933. So the causes of the Great Depression were overproduction in farming and manufacturing, which led to the falling prices in unsold goods. Speculation and buying on margin inflated stock prices beyond their real value. We also had a weak banking system in America. There was fewer regulations, risky loans, and bank failures. And then there was an uneven wealth distribution. The top 5% controlled most income, and there was a weak consumer demand. So there was a global depression after World War I, which reduced international trade. So all of these things led to the Great Depression. So when the stock market crashed on October 29th in 1929, it triggered a panic and everyone selling and billions lost in value. So there's a huge impact on Americans. So unemployment immediately soared to 25% and wages fell sharply for those still employed. Hoovervilles, shanty towns of homeless families. Farmers lost land due to foreclosures. Severe drought created the Dust Bowl, forcing migration west. Bread lines and soup kitchens provided charity and churches. Government response under Hoover. Rugged individualism, belief that aid should come from local charities, not federal government. So Hoover's whole idea was leaving the economy alone, and he believed that it would gradually become better over time. Now we have the New Deal. So this is FDR's New Deal, and there was the 3 R's through direct federal government involvement in the economy. First, you had relief, direct aid to an unemployed, such as the Civilian Conservation Corps and the Works Progress Administration. Recovery was stimulating the economy, such as the Agricultural Adjustment Administration and the Tennessee Valley Authority. And then lastly, reform, and this prevented future crises, such as using Social Security. The Wagner Act was passed and it strengthened labor unions. And then also, besides the New Deal, FDR had a failed attempt to influence Supreme Court in the court packing plan, and he had some critics such as Hugh Long, and he called for wealth redistribution. And then you had conservatives who feared socialism and deficit spending. Shifted political alignment. So many African Americans moved to the Democratic Party as a result of this. So, road to World War II. So, isolationist mood. So many Americans believed U.S. entry into World War I was a big mistake. There was many acts such as the Neutrality Acts of 1935, 1936, and 1937, and this prohibited arms sales, loans, and transports the nation at war, and it was designed to avoid the causes of World War I. However, there was aggression from abroad. Japan invaded Manchuria and China, Italy invaded Ethiopia, Germany rearmed, occupied the Rhineland, annexed Austria, and took Sudetenland. So U.S. response shifted toward aiding allies because of this. So the Neutrality Act of 1939, basically cash and carry. So this allowed arms sales if paid for in cash and transported by buyers, all to Britain. Destroyers for bases deal, U.S. gave Britain destroyers in exchange for base rights, and the Lend-Lease Act, and it authorized supplying allies with weapons and materials, and it ended pretense of neutrality. And then in 1941, you have Pearl Harbor. It was a Japanese surprise attack on U.S. Pacific Fleet in Hawaii, and it killed over 2,400 people. And it led Congress to declare war on Japan, with Germany and Italy declaring war on the U.S. soon after. So World War II on the home front. Mobilization, you have the War Production Board, which coordinated industry, rationing, ensured supplies, and women working in factories. Civil rights, such as the Double V campaign, pushed for victory against fascism and racism. Japanese internment under Executive Order 9066, and it was upheld in Korematsu versus US. So military strategy. Europe, D-Day 1944, push to liberate France, defeat Germany. Pacific, island hopping, battles of Midway and Iwo Jima. End of war. The Manhattan Project built atomic bomb, bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it forced Japan's surrender. The United Nations was formed to promote peace following the war. So, I know that was a lot of information. There's a lot of ins and out of this unit. You kind of have to understand the timeline. It starts with the imperialism, Roaring 20s, Progressive Era, World War I, World War II. So there's a lot to cover. I hope you guys continue to study. I hope this video helped you a lot. Here's the key vocabulary. I highly recommend going through it. And then here are the key historical thinking skills, which you need to start thinking about for the AP test. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it helped a lot, and I'll see you in the next APUSH Unit 8 Comprehensive Review. Bye.